Thank you. Thanks, everyone, and good morning. Great to see everybody. I don't know if it's me or not, but coming into Frankfurt, I live in Lexington, and I had drive that beautiful drive between Frankfurt and or between Lexington and Frankfurt coming through Versailles. And when I got here to Frankfurt this morning, the smell of chocolate is overwhelming. So I don't know if that's Rebecca Ruth's is cranking something out today, but it's a distraction that I'm going to have to manage all day long. Is that a thing here? Does anybody live in Franklin County or live around here that knows what that is?
I have no idea. I've noticed it myself coming in.
It is powerful. Well, I hope it is chocolate and not some kind of agricultural fertilizer for the spring that I just think smells like chocolate. So, but it's really good. But welcome everybody. We've got an exciting agenda to cover with all of you today. We've got Tony on with us to cover some communication items. Dr. Sweeney's on with us to do our mental health check-in, which we all need. I'll cover assessment, vision coalition work, just kind of looking ahead, visioning for the future of the state. We have some opportunities around virtual learning and continuation of hybrid models that school districts learned to put in place over the course of the pandemic. So we'll talk a little bit about the process around that. We know that there are lots of questions around the supplemental school year program or Senate Bill 128. So we have some support on here around that. And I did see that we had Commissioner Tackett. Commissioner, are you on with us too?
He should. Yes, I believe he is. He said he would be able to be on. So I think I saw him on. He might just be muted in on a phone call right now.
Okay. But, yeah. Maybe he's later on in the agenda. We know that on Senate Bill 128 in this ability or supplemental school year model, there are lots of academic and schooling questions, and then also lots of athletics questions. So the KHSAA, in addition to KDE, have attempted to provide guidance on this, but I think for every question we answer, it creates two more questions. So we'll have Commissioner Tackett on with us as well, with Chuck and Chuck Truesdale and Meredith Brewer, who are our respective directors of government relations and education policy, to talk about that with you and answer questions that you may have. And then we have a special element as well. I received word from a colleague of mine who's a professor at Harvard named Jal Mehta, and Jal is really interested in deeper learning and changing the student experience in education. And he sent some questions around what next school year should be like. And he's really interested in what students have to say about next school year and what that should be like. So we've got those questions that we're going to have for you as well. And it'll just be an opportunity for you to participate in a research study that students all over the country are participating in at the same time. But I think this is the only state level student group that's taking part. So Jal was really excited that we were going to have our student advisory take part in this as well. So that's what our agenda looks like. Tony, let me turn things back to you. Are there things that we need to do from a housekeeping standpoint to kick things off?
No, Commissioner, I was just telling them what a great job. We've got, obviously, our student advisory, many of our student advisory members are helping us out with the virtual tours. And I was just telling them about the excellent feedback that we are getting from community members and also across the department and people who are participating in the roles that they're playing in these virtual tours. So I just was thanking them and letting them know about that. So.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's been a real highlight of this whole experience, is that all of you supporting us in that, and that so many people in the state are getting to see what our young people can do. And we're just really proud of you and grateful for your help. Well, let's go to Dr. Sweeney to check on our mental health. And Dr. Sweeney, the chocolate smell in Frankfurt is helping mine, I think. So.
All right. Okay, so I just wanted to check in with you. This is very informal, but I want to check in and just see how you're doing. We know that many of you are coming off of a spring break. We know that many of you were able to get out of town. We know that many of you you just stayed home and tried to get some rest. So very informally, how are you doing? I will also say that we know that it can be intimidating to share about your mental health in a large group. However, when we do share, it helps all of us, it helps normalize the emotions that all of us are feeling, right? Because when Soliana says, I've been struggling, or when Caleb says, man, it's been a really tough, few months for me, then Anna, Renee might say, oh my gosh, I'm so glad that it's not just me. So would you feel comfortable sharing how you're doing? And remember, this activity is for not only the students, but also the adults with us, okay? So this is for everybody. As Dr. Glass said, we could all use a mental health check-in. So share how you're doing. Let us know what concerns you might have. And then also let us know if you have concerns that you're seeing from friends or teachers or other educators. So Anna, let's start with you.
Well, good morning, everyone. One concern that I have personally been having is the fact that I'm going back to normal life next week. I'm fully vaccinated, so that's very exciting. However, I've been pretty isolated. I've been stuck in my house for over a year now, and my life outside of this house is very busy. So I'm personally just worried about all the stress that's just going to come onto me. At one time. So I'm kind of starting to, I guess, occupy my mind with different things that seem productive to me. So that way when I leave this house, I kind of am used to the stress, but I also feel like I'm overloading myself with unnecessary projects. So that's just something I've been struggling with.
Can you tell us one thing that you've been occupying your mind with that has been cathartic for you or helpful for you and hasn't left you feeling even more overwhelmed, that maybe others could participate in or take part in?
Yes. So I have been really focusing on self-care in the aspect of physical health. So I've been working out 24/7. I play club soccer, so I kind of have to prepare for that. However, I've turned it into me doing this for myself and doing it for the health of myself and my body instead of just me training for something. So that's something that has mentally helped me, but also something that is something productive that I need to do.
Awesome. Okay, so I was a soccer coach. You have to tell me what club do you play for?
Yes, I play for Central Kentucky Storm.
Very good. Awesome. Thank you for sharing. Caleb?
Yes, so good morning. Let's see. Anna's thoughts reminded me sort of a dilemma that I have witnessed, even in people as young as my cousin. And so I want to start with that. My cousin is 5 now, and so she before the pandemic, she was, so talkative and outgoing. But she has really struggled lately with social anxiety, even at such a young age. And so I think that, we'll see how that applies to people our age and younger as we transition to life post-pandemic. But when it comes to my personal mental health, overall, I've been doing pretty well. I'm a little stressed when it comes to preparing for, college, and when it comes to sort of transitioning to life after high school. So that has definitely been something that's been weighing on me. And of course, with just finishing out the year, I feel like it's always a stressful time as, finals are approaching and that type of thing. So that's sort of where I'm at.
Caleb, can you let us know, where are you in the process for college? Have you been accepted?
Yeah, so I've been accepted, yes.
And I mean, you can't leave us hanging. Where are you going to go?
I'm going to go to University of the Cumberlands.
Okay.
And I'm going to major in elementary education with a minor in special education. So I'm excited about that. But still, there's a bit of stress, with transitioning and looking in that direction.
That's wonderful. You're going to be an excellent teacher. I'm actually an adjunct professor at University of Cumberland, so awesome. Welcome. All right, we had some others. So Layla?
Hi, good morning, everyone. I sort of was hoping to sort of speak on behalf of not only myself, but also some peers. And I know that this isn't the case for everybody, but Jefferson County came back to in-person, well, a hybrid schedule this past, or last week. Last week was our first week. And since the beginning of last week, we have seen, not just in my school, but throughout sort of a variety of schools that I've gotten to talk to for either high schoolers, maybe like a middle schooler that I tutor, and even some younger kids that I get to work with. They've all sort of had an underlying or consistent message that they've honestly sort of struggled going back to school. And I think part of the aspect was of that is that they were expecting being able to have sort of that like renewing the normalcy that we were hoping for, but that really just wasn't the case when we returned. And for some of the students that haven't returned, such as myself and some of my friends, we've also seen sort of a discrepancy between our schedules, if that made sense. And I think part of that is because with some students returning and some students staying virtual, teachers have favored the students that have been going back in person, which I know that may not be something that they like intend to do. However, subconsciously, since they have like that face-to-face interaction, that's really been something that's been like sort of hitting close to our hearts, just because we're all trying to continue to maintain a good, I guess, academic performance, but also staying motivated and staying encouraged. And so in some aspect, I think sort of this past couple of weeks, it sort of felt like for some students, they've been on their own just because they've had to be more independent with their work since they're staying virtual. And so I just wanted to bring that to attention. I know that isn't the case for everybody, and going to in-person school has been really helpful for some students so that they could have that interaction with teachers, but also students. But on the perspective of students that have to stay virtual, that it's been a little bit tougher on them.
So let me ask you this. We know that relationships are everything, and you know, we want all of our students to have just a tremendous rapport with their teachers. What would allow our virtual students to feel more connected to teachers when there is that kind of hybrid setting, and you have teachers that are doing both, you know, the in-person and the virtual?
You know, I think one of the biggest things, I think the majority of my teachers personally have worked really hard to address the fact that they know that it feels like virtual students are getting the short end of the stick. And honestly, it felt really encouraging and sort of, I guess, it felt like I was being heard last week when one of my teachers had addressed that he knows that that virtual kids have not been feeling as motivated and it's been tough on them. And he wants us to know that he is still trying to help us stay in the loop with all the announcements, especially with ACT stuff going on right now and how to prepare for college and different AP exams that are happening. So I think one thing academic wise that's really helpful is that teachers continue to post announcements about things that are relevant and maybe said in classroom, also on maybe Google Classroom. And so that has been really helpful. I also know rapport wise, with like a personal connection, I think it just sort of, that one's a little bit harder because teachers they don't really have much time and they're trying to, especially now, when we're trying to prepare for AP exams or meet certain standards, we don't necessarily have the time to stop and get to like do a check-in that we had hoped to be able to do. So I think in that case, we're doing really well by being able to stay in the loop academic-wise, but personally, it's a little bit harder. I think the main thing is just being able to continue to ask us, how are we doing?
Yeah, and it sounds like, you know, making sure that our kids feel heard and seen and like their voice is important, and we're allowing them to speak up, you know, when they may have some concerns. All right, so we have one more. We've got Jack, and I want to hear from Jack, but I also would like to hear from some adults on the call, just again, so we can help normalize these emotions for everybody. So Jack?
Oh, hi. So I don't know about anybody else, but lately I have been exhausted, like so tired. So we went back to normal day, 5 days a week, maybe middle of March, and everything. The first couple of weeks we're getting acclimated back. And then we got spring break, and my dad's the athletic director at the high school. So I went with our girls basketball team to Lexington, which was, amazing. We made it to the state championship, which I'm very proud of our girls for that. But, the first few days, we didn't have air conditioning on our whole floor. So that also is not very good sleep that I wish I had, especially coming off, our second 5-day week. And then, with all the girls going so far, there's a lot of emotions in that. So I was tired from that. Finally, my voice is coming back, which is awesome. But just kind of, and then we're starting back school today, or we started back school yesterday, and I didn't get back till Sunday night because, we made it all the way to the finals. So that's late Saturday night, which I don't think I went to sleep till 12:30 or 1 because we got back at, 11. And then we had to eat because we didn't get dinner. So it's been a whole lot in a row. And spring break's supposed to be like that break before the final push of the year. And not getting that, I'm a little worried that I'm going to fall off towards the end of the year, which is the biggest part of the year, with finals, and then I got my AP test. So I'm mostly worried that I'm not going to get that rest. Along with track and field, I'm just starting my season. It's also, this is crunch time for that. So I don't know about anybody else, but have mainly just been exhausted, and I'm a little worried that I'm not going to get that final push that I've been working towards all year.
Yeah. So first and foremost, we're glad that you got your voice back.
Yes.
We tend to track different things in our lives. What assignments do we have coming up? What is the next track meet or practice? We tend to write all that down and make sure that we're on track with that. But we don't necessarily do the same with our own social and emotional well-being. So I encourage you to create a plan, to actually create a rest, a self-care and a plan for rest, because that's what it sounds like you need the most. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you.
So I want to model this, and similar to you, Jack, I got here yesterday. It was my first time, my first day back from spring break, and I was in a meeting, and the exhaustion came over me. So I asked my colleagues, I said, I just got my second dose on Sunday. Did anybody else have this side effect? And when other people said, oh my gosh, I had the same side effect, again, it helped normalize those things that I was going through. It was very helpful for me to hear. So again, that's the purpose of this. All right, Tony.
Yes, since you want to ask from adults, and I feel like I can contribute a little bit, and I'll tell you that I've been extremely exhausted myself. So it's just been tough. I think trying to find that balance for us as adults too, as we go back and forth and try to figure out what our new normal is, post COVID. Working from home has its challenges for many of us at KDE. I know that. And then, the days when you work from the building, it's a whole new set of tired because you're just not used to it. The drive and then working all day and then, not being able to get home quickly and stuff. So it is, it's stressful and very tired on adults too. So it's just important. I'm trying to remind myself to do a little bit more of, just checking out, even if it's just for an hour or two each night. Obviously it's a really busy time for us here at the department and for the communications team, and with everything that we're trying to do at the end of the year to help our schools with support. But even with everything being as busy as it is, I'm trying to have that reminder to just kind of sign off and just take some time for myself.
Yeah, that's so important. First and foremost, I want to say thank you to your communications team, because you all are amazing and help us out so much and do so much for our schools and our students. But it's also interesting to me that as educators, we're so used to taking care of everybody else. Guess who we don't take care of? Ourselves, right? We want to make sure that everybody else is good, but we don't take the time to make sure that we're good. So if you can, just remind yourself of this little quote, like, I deserve grace. I deserve grace, and you do, because you do a lot for everybody. We have so much on the agenda today, so I'll stop here. However, if you have any other concerns about mental health concerns that you're seeing throughout your school, with your friends, with your caregivers, with your educators, please put that in the chat box and let us know. Thanks. Have a great day.
All right, thank you, Dr. Sweeney. I think next we have Dr. Glass is just going to briefly go over. I know many of you, in fact, I know several of you, there's a couple of students today, Dr. Glass from Jefferson County, who are taking the ACT. So they're not with us today, but I know you wanted to talk just a little bit, give them an update on assessment and our vision at KDE, and also this coalition work. Several students have been hosting the virtual tours, and we're interested in what the coalition work with the CIE group would mean.
Sure, thanks, Tony. Typically, when a new leader comes into an organization or a new commissioner comes in, you embark on this effort around listening and outreach right in the first couple of months, or the first 100 days is often a marker that's put in place that where individuals do a lot of this sort of outreach and gathering. When I started in Kentucky, it was in September. And we were managing something else. It was COVID, and so that consumed all of our time. All of everybody's time at KDE was really consumed with managing all of the concerns and challenges that were associated with COVID. And we did try some outreach electronically through what we called our Keep, Start, Stop survey, where we asked people what we should keep doing, stop doing, and start doing in education. But then all of most of the responses that we got back were things that we should keep, start, and stop doing related to COVID. So it was just that people were sort of unable to see beyond that moment that they were living in right then. There was a sort of a next layer. So once people were able to sort of get their opinions out of the way around COVID or opening or not opening schools or what that should look like, there was another layer that provided some good data, I think. But the experience that we all had in trying to open schools and have schools open with COVID definitely sort of made it impossible to gather feedback and information around a future vision for the state in a way that you would had we not been living through this experience. So fast forward to now, I'm nearly 6 months into this role now, over 6 months into this role now, and we're emerging out of COVID. We're not out of it yet, and still have some more work to do and more time and more complexity to fully emerge from this. But I think everyone can sort of see that we're nearing the end of what that whole experience has been. And so it's time now for us to start thinking about that visioning. What's the future direction? The listening tours that several of you have been participating in and helping co-facilitate has been part of that effort. And it's really an approach where I'm not coming in as the new commissioner and saying, this is what we're going to do, here's the vision and direction, get on board and try to sell people on it. It's really an effort to put out some ideas and then spend most of our time hearing from Kentuckians what they want for the future of schools. And so we we build the future direction based on the voices, perspectives, opinions, and aspirations of people all across the state that are part of the education system, that are students, that are teachers, and those that are in the community that have a vested interest in our education system being successful. So it's a different sort of way to go about building a future vision. Typically, the future vision is built by sort of creating a crisis, and if one doesn't exist, you manufacture it with data and say the sky is falling and use fear to get people to do something or to move. This is an intentionally different approach, and so we'll see if it can be successful as well. But it's an approach built on aspirations and listening. So I'm excited about that. It feels like the right way to go about it, certainly. So what we hope emerges from these listening tours, and then the data that we collected as part of the Keep Start Stop survey, and then some follow-up work that we're doing with a coalition of interested Kentuckians who will work on future visioning, a group that's also we're starting up that's going to work on how assessments might shift and what the future of assessments might look like. And then possibly we'll have to see what COVID looks like, but I'd love for us to have some kind of state convening where we could get people together in person to talk about future of education in the state in aspirational terms and looking far ahead. What could school be? What should school be? And I hope that we can do that in the fall. So all of that comes together to form this what will be a published vision document that we hope to have out early in the fall. And I can't tell you what's going to be in it because it's relying heavily on the voices and the information that we're hearing from and the data that we're collecting right now. Going more deeply on the assessment work, we have convened with the Center for Innovation in Education, and some of you that have been in our listening tours and facilitated those, you hear from Paul Leather or Gretchen Morgan at the end of those conversations, asking people to participate in that coalition work or in the assessment work. We've really partnered with them as a group that helps structure conversations around how assessment can change or should change. And it's really a focus on moving away from an education system that's heavily focused on content knowledge acquisition and toward a system where content knowledge acquisition certainly remains important. So the facts matter a heck of a lot, and that hasn't gotten any less. But there are a lot of other things that we think matter equally or have become much more important. They're the things like complex problem solving, perseverance, collaboration, creativity, all sorts of skills that as automation increases, as the globalization of the economy increases, as information just becomes faster and more available, those things become more and more important. So there's a little overview of the approach that we're taking. I'd welcome any feedback that you have just as you're seeing this play out in real time. And being part of these conversations around how things are going, or if you recommend any mid-course corrections to us, or who are we not hearing from that we need to be hearing from. So I'll pause there and see if there are any questions, but mostly interested in just your feedback and advice.
One thing that as part of this conversation is for those of you that are participating in some of the rooms, who do you want to hear? Who are we missing? Who are some of the people that we're missing? And how can we go about reaching? I think that could be part of this conversation as well, as you think about what Dr. Glass has brought up in terms of the work that we're hoping to do with the vision and the coalition work. Sophie?
Hi, everyone. I can't turn on my camera right now because the school has disabled it, but I personally have not been on one of the listening tours yet, but doing things like this in the past and trying to conduct kind of outreach stuff like this, I've noticed that it's always been very, very hard to target a lot of like traditionally marginalized communities, especially like low income communities, and especially because this event is like only through technology, that can be very hard for a lot of families. And I know that's like something that can't necessarily be worked around, but potentially if there was a way that like students or families could go to their school, especially if their school is in person, and then almost like join from their school and watch it on like a screen or something, potentially we could reach out to more people that are not able to join, and reach out to some more like marginalized groups. And then also reaching out to specific groups that help those groups. So like family services, and a lot of other like social justice based groups in schools that might do some more advocacy work with those kinds of communities could be a way about reaching out and making sure that we're hearing from everyone.
Thanks, Sophie. That's a great suggestion. I think as we round the corner on the pandemic and can get more to those in-person meetings, that's a great suggestion. We have to think about how we can get into families and communities that haven't been heard and make sure that their voices are represented.
All right. Looks like Jack. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I haven't participated in a tour yet, but I was just wondering, are we getting a lot of involvement from school administration? Not specifically like superintendents, but like principals, assistant principals, stuff like that. That's just a question I have.
Well, I think we have a mix of people that are coming to these. There are a few sort of hyper interested individuals, I think, maybe is a way to talk about them. People that are really interested in education policy in the state and that follow it closely. They are in these meetings for sure. And we've got teachers and superintendents and administrators and parents and students. It's really been a mixture. And I think that's going to increase as we have more of these going forward. We did have some technical challenges with our first one in Louisville. Some of you were part of that, but we're making that one up. And of course, people have the opportunity to go to any of these meetings that they want to. But I think as we continue to have the town halls, our representation will continue to grow more broadly. But I do think that we're getting a good representation of different viewpoints and people from parents and students to teachers to administrators and from building to district level administrators, as well as just people that are in communities that are interested, and policymakers. We're having some legislators and people that are parts of organizations also taking part. So it's been a nice mixture, and we'll keep promoting and trying to get that representative view.
Awesome, thank you.
All right, Caleb.
So from experience, I've taken part in as a facilitator for one tour stop, and then I guess I'm also taking part on Thursday, I believe. Tony, you may be able to correct me on that, but essentially what I've noticed is, the way the questions are phrased and the way the questions have been formatted, it really allows people to take a step back and almost separate themselves from the current situation regarding COVID. By reflecting on those past experiences, it sort of allows people to draw on positive and negative aspects of their educational experiences, of their children's educational experiences, to help prepare for the future post-COVID. And to sort of build on what Sophie said, I think it is important for us to work to continue, to reach out to community members, be it, family resource youth service center directors, be it, church staff or church outreach coordinators in communities, things along those lines. I think it's important to bring all of those perspectives because, when we consider all of a community's perspective, we in turn best serve people. So those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Caleb. The empathy interviewing process that we're doing, it's a one sliver of a whole approach to thinking that's called design thinking. And it's built on, you have to start by hearing from the people who are impacted by the decisions that you make and the system that you're working to design. You start with that. Because that makes sure that you are actually working on a problem that's real. and not something that you believe. I mean, it would be like if a company just came in and said, hey, we've got this new product and you don't even know that you need it, but we're going to sell you on it. And you may not need it, but here you go. This is going to be the next greatest next thing. So it's really backing up and saying, we'll listen to the stories, listen to the experiences that people have that are in our schools, that are out of our schools, that are working with our schools. Because everybody's a learner. Everybody's had learning experiences, and everybody's had experiences with teachers, and everybody struggled through things that got in the way of their learning. So these are some of the questions that we're asking about, and asking for those stories and people to bring them forward, so that what we design as an education system going forward is built on amplifying more of what works. And then mitigating or doing less of what didn't.
Okay. Looks like one more, Dr. Glass, Anastasia.
Yeah, so I've facilitated both of the town halls that we've had so far, and I definitely would say that, as we kind of discussed before the meeting had officially started, was having more student voices be involved besides the student facilitators. I've heard a lot of parents discussing and a lot of teachers, but I haven't really heard, as Jack had mentioned before, school administrators. I think they would give a very good viewpoint that us students couldn't exactly relate to, but we would know what they're talking about. And I also think having the students, especially when it comes to assessments and all that, because those do affect us in major ways, like mental health. I know some struggle with just knowing there's assessments coming up. So I think getting to hear all of their opinions on the topics that we're discussing would definitely help build a foundation for the coalition later on. So I think just reaching out to more students to get them involved.
Well, thanks, Anastasia. I couldn't agree more. We'll have to continue promoting these listening opportunities. We've got a couple, about 6 weeks of these that we're doing, and we're just really at the beginning. So there's still great opportunities to involve students and bring them into these discussions.
Yep, sounds good. It looks like we're good on comments there. And just to echo Dr. Glass, for those of you who may not have joined us on the pre-conversation, but you all use your voice. You all are great ambassadors in your communities, and do what you can to share the message about the virtual tours. Students are very obviously, that we have a very high priority on hearing from you all, but we want to hear from everyone. So even if it's just one night, they don't have to be in their particular part of the state. It's virtual. They don't have to go anywhere. Just encourage them to sign up and just be part of the process. We've got people in the rooms that are taking notes and just to hear what their experiences are. We want to innovate and make changes. And in order to do that, we have to know what to change, what needs to change. And so it's very, very important that we hear from you all and your colleagues, your student colleagues. So, all right, Dr. Glass, I think we're ready to go to the next item on the agenda, which is the waiver for virtual learning for the 2021-2022 year. Several of you had asked about whether there was going to be an option for NTI or virtual learning for the next school year, since we're still in the middle of COVID. So, Dr. Glass, if you'd like to chat about that.
Sure. One of the challenges that we've had with continuing with virtual learning or hybrid learning options has been the funding structure that Kentucky has for anything that isn't a traditional school model. And that is that how those operate currently is that districts have to offer the course, have the staff available to teach it, pay the staff and any supports that are necessary, but they don't actually receive the funding unless the student passes the course. So it's a performance-based model, and the district has to up front put out all of the funding necessary for the course to operate. So that's been a real impediment and barrier to continuing with virtual and hybrid schooling options, because schools are concerned about, rightly concerned about. Sorry, I have to move around more. My lights turn off in here. Schools are rightly concerned about the funding impact and what that might mean. So we have come up with a model or an effort to try and alleviate that at KDE. And so how that works is we have a list of guarantees that schools have to agree to. They have to guarantee to meet several aspects of state law. And these are things like making sure that classes, virtual hybrid classes, are taught by a certified teacher, that there's an effort to gather attendance and measure that. That there are grades that are issued as a result of the experience. So there are some things that match up with an in-person class experience that a district would say, we'll guarantee that we will do this electronically or virtually or in a hybrid model, so there's some parity. And so long as school districts will make that guarantee to us, they can apply for a waiver from the performance-based post hoc after the fact funding model. And so we're gathering those applications for that waiver process right now. The State Board of Education is the one that has to waive that, and so they can receive the funding up front, just like if it would be funded just like a student was an in-person student. And then we're going to work on trying to change the funding model longer term to really not have to do a waiver every year, to allow school districts to operate virtual and hybrid and in-person schooling models, and allow students to participate in those as they choose. So we're really trying to expand the options that are available to students and families, and that schools can operate and not create differences in funding based on the structure. So that's what we're working toward. This will not be called NTI, or non-traditional instruction. NTI is really was intended as a temporary shift for a whole school district as a result of a weather or some emergency. I don't think it was ever considered that we'd have an emergency this long that we were in over this pandemic, but that's how we used it. It's really, what we're talking about is not a continuation of NTI. It's the creation of hybrid and virtual schooling options as available courses or experiences for students. So that's a different, and we know that some of our legislators have been concerned about any continuation of NTI or virtual experiences, because a lot of students struggled in those experiences, and that's right. What we're trying to do with this is recognize that we also had students who succeeded in hybrid and virtual learning options, and we want those options to continue, or at least allow our school districts to be able to offer them and smooth out some of the funding struggles that occur and the way those are currently structured. So I'll pause here and just receive any feedback that you have around that. But again, the major driver is to try and create new and different learning options for families and make it easier for school districts to offer those. Looks like you're muted, Tony.
And it looks like I'm muted. It looks like, let me go again. It looks like Caleb has his hand up. Go ahead, Caleb.
Yeah, so I just have a question here. So I know that I've received both of my COVID-19 vaccinations and for the Moderna vaccine, and I know that Anna is also fully vaccinated. So my question is, you know, in the coming year, have any thoughts been given to the idea of potentially administering vaccines to some students? And I'm just curious to know what that'll look like when the time comes. I mean, I know that, you know, the Pfizer vaccine is available for 16 and up, of course, and then there are discussions right now taking place that it could potentially, you know, be administered to people age 12 and up, just depending on how the FDA approaches that.
Yeah, I think we're going to see it get vaccines be made available to children. Just last week, I think I saw this studies come out on the large-scale clinical trials of the Pfizer vaccine. May have been Pfizer. I think it was Pfizer or Moderna, one of the two, where they had done children and found high levels of protection and low levels of adverse reactions, similar to what we saw in adults with that. So I expect that we'll see the other vaccines also be coming forward with their clinical trials. One of the reasons that it hasn't been offered to children and young people, well, there were a couple. One was that the people who are most at risk went first in line. So it was the older adults. And that's why we're seeing, honestly, the death rates really come down, is because now the people that are most at risk from COVID are largely protected. We've seen the death rates come down. We're also seeing some of our behaviors go back to pre-COVID days, and so that's slowing down or actually reversing the infection rate. So infection rates are going back up in some places, but it's not those most at-risk people who are getting it. So people that are more likely to survive are getting it. So that's good news and bad news, I guess. But just so that's one reason we haven't had a lot of kids or young people vaccinated, is because we targeted older people at risk, people that were in isolated centers where they couldn't get out, or essential workers. Now we're past those groups and starting to move our way down the line toward other people. And at the same time, we haven't had that clinical trial to show that the vaccines are safe for young people and children, because the physiology is different. And so now we're getting those clinical trials out. So I think those two things together are going to lead us to the availability of the vaccine for children and young people going forward. I'm not an epidemiologist or am not medically trained, but I have read a heck of a lot as an educator, trying to understand what's going to happen and what this means. I think based on that reading, that what we will see with COVID going forward is that it will become an annoying childhood disease. This is part of life on Earth now. It's not going to go away. And so COVID will always be with us going forward, but it will likely be something that causes sniffles or a very mild reaction in young children going forward. And once everyone else, and so then once you're exposed to it, there will be larger scale, that herd immunity protection that's around. What should trouble us all is the increased mutations and the variants of this disease that may come forward, because viruses do continue, like all forms of life, they continue to evolve and adapt and change and find ways to infect new people and to survive. So we have to keep an eye on that going forward. But I do, just to make a sum up, I do expect that we'll start seeing vaccinations going out to children below 16 and young people within the next 2 to 3 months. Looks like Cade has your hand up. Go ahead, Cade.
Yeah, I had 2 questions. So with the waiver, is that really going to be more of an elimination of NTI, and just so they can immediately switch to virtual if there is even a weather incident or something? Or is that just solely to add the option? Will there still be NTI, or is it just going to be the virtual in the future?
Yeah, it's really to add the option of a full-time virtual or a hybrid model for students that they could stay in the whole year. Schools will still have an NTI option as well. So let's say you had a flood in your community, or you had a really bad ice storm that locked everything down for 3 or 4 days or something. Schools would still be able to use NTI the way it was before the pandemic and shift the whole district to virtual learning for a short period of time. But I would say NTI will go back to being a reaction to some kind of emergency. And then what we hope continues forward are really a variety of different schooling models for students that include in-person options, virtual options, and all sorts of hybrid options. And I think the variety of those is just going to continue to expand. And we'll start to see students taking more and more sort of blended options where they take, some courses in person, some courses online, and a mixture of the two as well.
Okay, and then this was kind of, I don't know if I was muted. This is kind of inspired by Caleb's question, but like I'd say probably at least by the fall, like a lot of our high school population will be eligible for the vaccine. So will that be like a major priority of the department, or is it just kind of going to be encouraged?
Well, I think that we can expect it to be widely available by then. It's getting more available by now already. So one of the things that we expect to have happen is at the beginning, there was a shortage of vaccine and a high demand. So you had lots of people that wanted it and not enough of it. So that created a shortage. So when you have a high demand for something and low supply, we are shifting to a time when the demand will be less, so people are sort of less desperate to get it, and more people have it, and the supply is going to be much better, and so the shortage is going to go away. So I expect that by the fall, really by the end of summer, the vaccine will be easy to acquire. You can sign up and get it, including students. It will be easy for students to get it as well.
Okay. All right. Great questions, guys, as always. Wonderful discussion. Does anybody else have anything else you would like to add to the, looks like we've got a comment in there. Dr. Park, go ahead and ask if you'd like to jump in the conversation.
Thank you so much, Tony and Dr. Glass. You laid this conversation and discussion out perfectly. I'm interested in from our student leadership team here. As virtual and hybrid options continue to expand, and what you know about your students in your school district, do you think the option? And do you think that students and families in your school district will utilize or leverage this expanded option? So I'm interested in that question. And just as a note, right now we have about 143 of our 171 school districts who offer some type or flavor of virtual course offerings or virtual learning options. Thank you.
You're welcome. Go ahead, Caleb.
So I would be happy to share some thoughts on the topic. So first of all, I do think that offering that virtual sort of environment for students is really a great idea moving forward. And I say that because in rural Breathitt County, there are significant health issues that impact young people. But also, there are a number of grandparents who raise their grandchildren. So that's sort of what comes to mind. So I think that providing that virtual learning environment allows not only for flexibility, but also for security when it comes to health issues and things along those lines. So that's sort of my thinking. But also, I think it's important to note that sort of looking at it as more of an option rather than as sort of, like more of a mandate per se. So I think that the option aspect of things, when you bring that into play, it sort of changes the conversation, but also just, focusing on the virtual learning as an option.
Okay, great. Lauren Little.
Yeah, so I think for our district, I actually do not think that we should have a virtual option because right now, like over half our school is virtual, and a lot of kids think that they can just not do their work and just stay at home and do nothing. And so they're not really learning anything. And I feel like next year that will continue to happen. So I feel like that's not a good idea for our district. And also, we have a high poverty county, so some students don't even have the technology and stuff to be able to learn as well as other kids that are in school.
So Lauren, did your so are there students that are still struggling to connect virtually in your district with devices, or is it the connectivity that's a problem?
Well, some of the kids, there are live meets and stuff that they're supposed to go to, but some kids, they don't get on their computers and stuff at all. Like they're just unmotivated and don't want to do their work.
Okay. Thank you. Sam Smith, go ahead.
Hi. I think our district this year, and I think most districts, if not all, is that anyone can join virtual at any time for any reason. But starting next year, our district is planning, it hasn't been passed yet, but is that they want to link some sort of where they can deny people going all virtual. So they would have to prove some sort of medical need for going all virtual. And this allows, I'm going to say, a lot less abuse of the virtual system, because I do think the virtual system is very important. And so I think that kind of has a nice middle ground of allowing people who really need to go virtual to be virtual, and also allowing, people who probably do better in school, who don't have a need for virtual, to stay in their virtual or stay in their in-person setting.
Great. Thank you, Sam. Looks like we have Logan. Logan?
Yeah, similar to Sam, I think that we're at kind of the same area in that we can be virtual if we'd like, we can go in person if we'd like right now. But I think moving forward into that next year, it's very important to have that option. But I do think people will choose to stay virtual for the wrong reasons, if that kind of makes sense. Or, even looking forward in the future, maybe that is like an option. Maybe we do have this hybrid model of, I don't have a very busy day today, I'm going to go virtual. Or, it's my senior year, I'm taking 2 classes, why even go into school? So I think that you're going to see more of that, of trying to, let's just kind of get through this year, not really have to do like least amount of work possible without having to go into school. But definitely, I think it should be an option because COVID is still, a concern and really affecting families. So not to downplay that side of things, but you'll definitely, I think, see that kind of virtual choosing for not necessarily COVID particularly.
Okay.
I've put in the chat the waiver document, so you see that link there, and if you scroll to about the third page or so down, it says district assurances. So you see the things in order to do this that the districts have to agree to take part in. I think that I have several reactions to the things that you're raising. One difference in what's happening going forward versus where we've been is that we're going from the district or the virus really being the one that's deciding what the education model is to being something that the student and the student's family are deciding. So the school district has some degree of decision making too, because they can decide what they're going to offer. But I do think there's going to be a demand for this. We certainly will have students in virtual and in hybrid models who are not succeeding. But if we're honest, we have students in in-person school who are not succeeding. And so you can, in any of these routes, things can be done badly, and disengagement can take place. So I think whatever form the learning takes place, it should be there's some consideration what's best for the student, what's the best learning environment for the student, and if it's in person, if it's a virtual, or if it's a hybrid, how do we have supports in place for the student? How do we have accountability in place for the student to make sure that things like truancy or chronic disengagement or absenteeism are not taking place.
Okay. Anastasia?
So here in Oldham County, we've had all three options for schooling. In the beginning of the year, we were all NTI or VLA, and now we are fully in person or VLA. And I've heard mixed reviews from people that have gone to VLA and come back to full in person. Some of them have enjoyed just being able to do it at their own pace. Others would like to come back, but it's their parents don't feel safe with them going to school. So I think having VLA is an option for the parents that are worried about COVID and the health of their children is a good option. But I do think, like how everybody else has said, having VLA used for the right reason and not just, I don't feel like doing school, I just want to stay home and do my work when it's good for me, that does need to get addressed.
It's a good point. Very good point. Trevin?
Can you hear me okay?
We can.
I mean, I agree with what Logan and Sam said. I think that we need to have a virtual option. And yeah, there are some students that are going to choose the virtual option, not for the right reasons, like Logan said. But I think we have to take into consideration what this past year has been. I mean, I'm an in-person student now, and there's in-person students that are unmotivated too, that some literally will just not do their work. Like, they do not care anymore. So I think that next year, after we have our summer break and we kind of just shift away from the unnormalcy of trying to get back into normalcy at school with the mask and social distance and everything like that, I think the break will be good for everybody, and that students that do choose to stay virtual will be more motivated next year than as they are this year, because this year I just think we are all dragging by just trying to finish out this school year as fast as we can.
Okay. That's a good point as well. I see several of you still have your hands raised. I'm not sure if those are still from before. Lauren and Anastasia and Caleb. Is that still from before, or did you have a couple of other points you want to add until we move on to the next item on the agenda?
Yeah, so I won't take long. I just wanted to add to my prior thought. As I was listening to other people, kind of speak, some new ideas came to mind. So I've actually been thinking just these past few minutes about how a few years ago, my grandmother was a homebound instructor, and so she would travel out into the county and work with students at their home. And so those students were really separated from their learning environment. And I feel it is to a degree the same now. However, I think a silver lining we can sort of look at and sort of we can learn from is that a virtual option allows students to connect with, in a more personal way, their classroom. And so that's an idea that I have that I would just like to share that sort of came to mind. And then also, I do think that it is important to note that, there does need to be accountability when it comes to learning and ensuring that young people are able to learn in an environment that best suits them. And so I think that as we move forward, it's important to look at this, sort of from the perspective of allowing students to have individual experiences and individualized, tailored experiences to best meet their needs. So thank you.
Of course.
That's Caleb, that's very well said. The last point I'll mention based on your share out just now is this waiver that Dr. Glass shared in the hyperlink and that we've worked on over the last several weeks is really kind of based on an original waiver for homebound students, where school and district leaders stepped up to say, hey, we can actually service learning in better ways and monitor progress in better ways through a full virtual option than maybe traditional options. And so I wanted to connect with you on that. So thanks for sharing that.
All right.
Just one final point I'd like to make on this. I think this is a continuation of a trend that has been growing and is only going to continue to grow. And that is that the forms of school and the opportunities for how learning can happen are only going to expand and get bigger. School choices, school options are only going to proliferate. And so this is part of that in Kentucky, and the ways that students can learn and the forms and of what school can take on is we're going to continue to see that grow and expand. And so I think it's a natural and important step for our public schools to think about how they can offer instruction differently than the walls of the school building and the structure that's been in place.
Good point. Very good point. Great discussion, you all. And I mean, again, just really appreciate the thoughts you all have for this, because, this is something we've never had to do before. Obviously in education, as we move forward and try to figure out how do we recover from this past year and dealing with the pandemic and moving forward. So very important. And there'll be more opportunities when I send you the exit slip too, if more thoughts come to you. That we'll share with Dr. Glass and the leadership team as well. So, all right, moving on to our next item on the agenda is an update on the supplemental school year program. We do have a couple of guests. Dr. Tackett, Julian Tackett is here from KHSAA, and Dr. Brewer, she's our education policy director, and then you met Chuck Truesdell last time, and Dr. Glass, take it away.
Yeah, so there's been a heck of a lot of conversation about this, and so I'm going to let Commissioner Tackett explain all of it, and
yeah, that's what you get. That's what you get for volunteering to come to our. Yeah, it's a prep for the superintendents later. Julian is what it is.
Thank you, Commissioner Tackett, for being with us. This is an issue that came up in the course of the legislative session, really out of a spirit, I think, of recognizing that students had missed out on a lot this past year, and for those that want it, they should be afforded an opportunity to go back and recreate those experiences. If they feel like they missed out on something that they want to go back and redo, or there were courses or things just in the course of an educational, this last educational year that students want to make up. So that was the idea behind it, which is, I think, a good idea, and it's a great thing to provide for students. What happens is, I get that phrase, the devil is in the details. This thing is complicated because our education system assumes that people get a year older, they learn what they needed to that year, and then they move forward. It doesn't assume that there's this mass sort of redo that's available to everybody. So you've got funding questions, enrollment questions, graduation rate calculation, measure questions, testing questions, and then a whole slew of athletic questions, eligibility questions that come up because of this. So we're doing our best to provide guidance to districts on what we think this means and how it can work. The department has issued guidance to districts on that, and we have Commissioner Tackett on with us. KHSAA has issued guidance on how this works from an athletic perspective, and I think Commissioner Tackett, he might agree, but this is another one of those situations where every question we answer seems to generate two more questions. We have a ton of hypothetical situations, some of which are not so hypothetical coming forward, where people want to know, how does this work, or what are my options? And so we're having to commit to being flexible to listening and answering questions. So I'll pause there. Let me turn to Chuck and Meredith first. Just to provide any overview of Senate Bill 128's provisions and how it operates. And then I want to bring Commissioner Tackett on, because a lot of the questions that have come up around this are athletics and activities related. I know he and his staff have done a ton of work thinking that through as well. But let's turn to Chuck and Meredith first, just as an overview of the mechanics of how this works.
Thanks, Dr. Glass. So just as an overview, students have until May 1st to request to participate in the program, and then school districts have until June 1st to determine if they want to offer the program. So all students will submit their interest, and then the local school board will review and decide. The way that the bill is written, it's an all or nothing proposition. So every student who requests, if the district decides to move forward, they all will be given the supplemental year. If they choose to not participate, then no student who requested will be given that option. This does not prevent the district from retaining students as they have in the past. So certainly if a student has an academic need and the school has determined that it's best that that student repeat a year, then they are able to do that for academic reasons or whatever reasons they have identified. So this is just for those supplemental year requests. It's all or nothing. After June 1st, the districts will then, who decide to participate, will submit their interest to participate to the Board of Ed. And we have a system at the department called GMAP. And so districts will indicate that they are participating through that system so that we know which districts are. And then there'll be a way within our accounting system for them to flag those students so that we can be sure to know that they are repeating that year for all of the different things that we need for SEEK and for Infinite Campus and different things like that. So that's, we're still figuring out, as Dr. Glass said, there are a lot of details that we're still pinning down, but those systems are being figured out. The big thing that I think is important to consider for students, the bill does say that you can repeat coursework that you did not successfully pass. So you can repeat courses that you did not get a passing grade in, or you can take courses that are related to what you took previously. So we, in our guidance document, that they need to have a reasonable connection to the coursework that you had this year. So districts are able to interpret that and they have that flexibility, but the bill really is to repeat the academic experiences that you may have missed out on during this year. So you feel like you need additional support to successfully master that content. And
thanks
for me. Yep, there's Chuck. He can.
Sorry. Good morning, everyone. I'm joining by phone, so you don't have to look at my face while I talk. Meredith did a great job giving you an overview. The only thing I would add on a couple of points is that you can retake courses. However, students cannot earn credit twice for the same course. So if you got a B in Algebra 2, you can't retake the course, get an A, and then get 2 different, credits for your 4 credits for math for graduation. That is not how that works. You take Algebra 2 and get 1 credit for it no matter how many times you take it. The other thing that I would point out is that for all of our special populations in schools, so students with learning disabilities, students with physical disabilities, homeless and foster care students, gifted and talented students, nothing about the supplemental school year program removes the obligation to treat them the way that they are supposed to be treated under federal and state law. So, for instance, a student may have an IEP or a 504 plan, and the supplemental school year program may cause them to update the IEP or the 504 plan, but you can't discard it entirely. Same thing for, say, gifted and talented students. Homeless or foster care students are entitled to complete the school year in the school that they started the school year in, even though they are, a highly transient population. And so that does not change under this program. And so that's just something that I think students and districts need to keep in mind as they consider applying to this sort of program.
So a couple other things I would point out just based on Chuck's comments. So you do need to be enrolled in the school in which you want to repeat the year as of May 1st. So if a student were to transfer schools May 10th, they would not be eligible for the program. So May 1st is the cutoff date per the bill's specifications. I think hottest topic is about our graduated seniors. And so there is a statute that specifically states that students who have completed all state and local requirements shall be issued a diploma. And we know that word means a lot when it is written in law. And so that is how we have interpreted this, that those students who have completed all of the requirements that were outlined when they started their senior year would be issued a diploma. So those students are eligible to come back for an additional year. However, their coursework will be noted differently on the transcript. So because they've graduated, their GPA will be locked and it will have already been calculated because they'll have a diploma and all the rights that accompany that diploma. You'll be a high school graduate, but you can come back for that 5th year and take coursework. And again, the district will need to determine what that looks like exactly, because if you want to repeat a course, you certainly can. If you wanted to retake a math course, if you wanted to get a better understanding of the content or whatever that student feels is best and with the guidance of the school, but they would not get the weighted grade. So the transcript will show the courses that they took and the grade they earned, but it's not going to affect the GPA. So there'll be a separate spot on the transcript that will show that they took pre-calculus, got an A, maybe they took it before and got a B, but it won't change the weight. There won't be a weighted grade there on your GPA. So we'll let Commissioner Tackett speak to the sports implications of the bill. I promise I have not one athletic bone in my body, so I should not speak to athletics in any capacity. So we will let Commissioner Tackett answer those questions.
Well, I'll just give you a real brief summary because a lot of what Dr. Glass's staff has said is exactly as we're trying to stay in lockstep with them so that students don't get one answer on sports and another answer on academics, and that's really critical. I can tell you though, for students, you've heard this expression before, but both the Department of Ed and our office are building this plane while we're flying it. There are literally changes every day as new questions come up and new clarifications need to be made. The most confusing part of the original guidance and even the law deals with dual credit students versus dual enrolled students, and does that make a difference in whether they're able to do things. Let's talk separately, if you don't mind, about seniors and then the other grades, because the other grades are actually a lot clearer. Seniors this year will have an opportunity, provided they are still considered full-time enrolled. They're going to have the opportunity to play sports again next year. As long as they can legally be enrolled, they won't be precluded from that. So you could very well have someone who is a graduate participating. That's unheard of in the athletics world and certainly in any other state. But we will stay together with the department on those students being enrolled. Now, the advantage or the carrot, though, is those students are going to have to be enrolled in 4 hours per day. They're not just going to be able to come back and take one class and somehow play for the football team or the soccer team. They're going to have to be enrolled for 4 hours. So the districts have a tremendous challenge ahead of them in the next 3 weeks in trying to cobble together a plan to decide what they're going to do with their seniors. And you have to remember that by the law, they have to make the same decision for all students, whether they're seniors or whether they're ninth graders. They cannot make a decision that says yes here, no here. So the whole the murkiness around the graduation and the graduation requirements is what we are still working through. I suspect you will see more and more clarification come out. The bottom line is we have 3 or 4 rules that would normally have impacted a kid being able to continue playing while they're repeating. And number 1 is a state regulation that says you can't play while you're repeating. And the theory behind that we can all figure out. For the other 104 or 5 years we've been around, it was felt if you were repeating a grade, then you should probably be focusing on something other than sports. That's a little different when you go through a pandemic. And so the sponsor of the legislation, Senator Wise, came to us early on and said, really, we're going to try to see if this gets traction, as legislators like to say. And between the House and the Senate, I believe there were 6 no votes. Chuck can tell me if I'm wrong. But that tells you it pretty well got a whole lot of traction. So our assignment is simply to find a way to implement it for the great young people of our state. So we will allow that. We will also have to suspend a couple of rules. Those of you, I heard a couple of you that mentioned you played sports. One of the things that you went through every year was the first day of school, someone checked your number of credits to determine if you were on schedule to graduate. Well, that rule kind of has to go out the window for next year. and probably the next couple of years as we ask the districts to simply make a logical and valid determination if they think students are on par to graduate. Will people take advantage of that? I refer you to your earlier conversation about people taking advantage of online instruction versus in person. There will probably be someone take advantage of the situation and get something they probably shouldn't. But in the end, the greater good's what's more important. What will not change, and I'm so glad that Dr. Glass's staff and others went back and reiterated this, is this deadline of May 1st. If you hear of people talking about, and you know, one of the things that we fight every day is a group of parents sitting in the stands deciding where their kids are going to go and getting this whole group of families together, and we're all going to go to this one school and we're going to solve the world's problems and we're going to win every championship. And you know that generally doesn't happen. As students, you know that better than the adults do. But you know, we know that this May 1st is a hard and fast deadline in the statute. We talked very long and hard with the sponsor about being firm on that, and he agreed with us. We also are not going to let students, and I know we've got at least one on here from Breathitt County, so I'll use Breathitt as an example. We're not going to let a student at Jackson Independent transfer to Breathitt because Jackson Independent says no and Breathitt says yes. It is designed, and we have to keep in mind the fundamental behind the law was to let you have a chance in your original environment at a better year next year. And we have to keep it that simple. It wasn't designed to get you benefits or get other people benefits of things they wouldn't have otherwise gotten. So, we'll continue to clarify that. Be glad to answer any questions. I know Tony and staff are very good at making comments that elicit questions from you. Love the student input. We've had a couple of chances to talk to students about it. Ironically, during the legislative session, we talked to a couple of student groups. And when we talked to the student groups, there was no interest in staying in high school any longer than they'd already been there. When we talked to their parent groups, there was a lot of interest in keeping them back in high school another year. So I don't know if that is still the case, but I'd be very interested to hear from this group. So that's a little bit of summary of where we are. We'll keep revising our document, as Dr. Glass says. We have drafted it in pencil, as they say, because we know it's going to need a lot of erasing and rewriting as we go forward.
All right. So Commissioner Tackett, I know we have several athletes in this group, some of whom are seniors. So maybe they'll think about that for a second. Oh, and I see Caleb has his hand up. Caleb, go ahead.
So I will say that I had actually sort of asked Tony if we could talk about this today because I'm really interested in it. And it's good to see you on here, Commissioner Tackett. So I actually have a couple questions here that relate to sports. And just one of the questions actually that I'm going to ask you, Commissioner Tackett, and then also if someone else wants to chime in. And then I have another question that is kind of focused around academics. So I laughed a bit, when you talked about students, switching schools, going back and forth and whatnot, because in Breathitt County, we've seen that before. But if students, so my first question is, can students leave their school mid-redo year, or do they have to stay at the school that they were attending for their first year? I hope that makes sense. And then also, do the same eligibility requirements stay in place when it comes to like years down the road? I think that the deadline is 18 years of age by August 1st. If I'm wrong on that, you can correct me. I'm just curious to see how that'll come into play years down the road.
Okay, a couple of things, and those are great questions. Number one, as far as transferring goes, during the repeat year, they're going to be like every other student and continue to be subjected to the rules. For example, if you decided to stay back a year and postpone your Cumberland trip, then you might mid-December say, well, I want to, my family gets a job in Bowling Green and I need to change schools. I still want to go to Cumberland. Well, you've always got within the rules the opportunity to transfer, provided you meet those bona fide exceptions. And one of them is a change in residence by the family. We're not going to take that, that can't be taken away, but you're not going to be able to simply change because all of a sudden 4 of your senior classmates didn't come back and you all aren't very good and you'd like to go to another team and play. So the athletics related stuff will be kind of a little bit of a thread line we'll keep there. Now, the age rule, by statute, not just by our rule, but by statute, you become ineligible if your 19th birthday is before August 1st. And that will remain the same. So that even with, and matter of fact, specifically in the bill, that was deliberately not waived. That's a health and safety measure with designed. And part of it is we are the only state in the country that our legislature feels athletics is important enough that it mandated 7th and 8th graders to be able to play. We did that years ago when, if you want a 5-second history lesson, when girls basketball started in our state, the juniors and seniors did not feel like they had the ability to be out there playing, and they needed the younger kids to fill out the teams. Now it's just become a way of life where the 7th and 8th graders play. That means you've got 6 years difference between kids playing in a game, traveling on a bus, being in a locker room. That's a pretty extreme difference. To add another year or two to that was just not felt to be very secure. So they left that intact. We're thankful for that. You will find mathematically, if you start on time, every kid in Kentucky gets 1 year that they can repeat, and they won't be too old. That may be that may be in kindergarten. That may be after 3rd grade, whenever your parents decide. So to be impacted by this, you're not only going to have already had that year, but another year. So that's why we were pretty comfortable leaving the age rule where it was, and we're glad the legislature did.
All right, thank you for clarifying there. I really do appreciate you being here today. I also do have a question too that relates back to, I know you mentioned, Commissioner Tackett, like dual credit students, and I've been thinking, from a post-secondary aspect of things, I've actually taken some dual credit classes, and I know that the cost of dual credit classes are significantly less for high school students than they are compared to traditional college students. And so my question is, potentially could students who decide to stay back a year, seniors who decide to stay back a year, would they be able to take a huge load of dual credit courses to help reduce the cost? And what would that look like?
Well, let me answer the athletic side and hand it back to Meredith and Chuck to deal on the sheer academic side. For us, we're going to simply say you've got to stay enrolled. Your district determines enrollment. Now, in the KDE guidance, there's you have to really know the CPE regulations to understand a lot of the difference. And I had to get a refresher between dual enroll and dual credit. And that's where I'd like them to clarify, because that may help your answer.
Sure. So Caleb, the way that CPE has and Kia has provided, they provided the language for that section in our guidance document. So a student who is a 12th grader who has not completed all of their graduation requirements, so they are returning to 12th grade just as they would have in any other year, right? So there's still, if you don't fulfill all of your graduation requirements and you can't graduate, the high school will accommodate your return. Those students can be eligible for dual credit and for the associated dual credit scholarships and work ready scholarships. The graduated seniors do not have the option for that funding. And so they would be considered dual enrolled or concurrent enrollment with the post-secondary. And so the post-secondary is responsible for determining the classification that student has at their university. And so that really is contingent on which post-secondary we're talking about. And then that would determine what the tuition rate is. So it could be full price. So then that's up to each institution to decide.
Thank you for that.
And just to add to what Meredith just said, Caleb, that will also be determined by each institution in terms of whether the KEYS funding is available for that graduated senior as well.
So you aren't eligible for KEYS funding if you're a secondary student. So if you're in high school, you can't get access to your KEYS funding. So what classification you have will matter, but really our recommendation for schools is that they reach out to representatives from KIA to get, because that is a very specific situation based on each student and each institution. But generally speaking, if you're graduated, you can't come back and get that. It's a great idea, but that they aren't going to be able to accommodate that.
Well, thank you,
Caleb. If it makes you feel any better, there were 95 school administrators on a KASA call yesterday afternoon, and that was their #1 question that kept being asked.
That's right.
I know I had heard several talks about that here in Breathitt County, just in the community, parents who were curious and students alike. So thank you all for that clarification.
Okay. Looks like Jack, you have your hand raised. Jack? Looks like he may be having some issues. Usually his video is on as well. I will try to message him. Jack, can you hear us? Okay, we can maybe come back to Jack. Commissioner, if you want to move on. I've got the PowerPoint ready for this other activity that you would like to do with the students.
Sure, let's do that. Go ahead and let's bring it up.
Let me know when you can see my screen. Should be popping up here any minute.
Okay, great. Looks like we have it there, Tony. So this is, again, part of a national effort. It's outreach from Joel Mehta and from Harvard and another researcher from MIT who are seeking to gather feedback from students about what the fall might look like, learning about school, as we recover from COVID-19. That larger project is called Imagining September, and looks like we've shifted it to Imagining August, but we will contribute our thoughts from this group to that larger Imagining September group. So just some background, as you can see here. Adults are thinking about what school should look like, but too often adults are not asking young people about their experiences and how we take that into account in planning. These are an opportunity for you to share your learnings about yourself, your school, and to help design the way school should look around what the fall should look like and going forward. So we'll listen. We're going to ask these questions. We're going to write up a summary and share those with the professors at MIT and Harvard. They'll also, I think, be really useful for us in Kentucky, and they may result in some kind of publication that we do within the state as well, just as we share some of your thinking. So let's go ahead and dive into those questions. Tony, can you bring up the first one?
Sure, perfect.
All right. So the first question is, what are the aspects of remote learning that you've appreciated most and would like to see carried back into in-person schooling? I'm going to model something here, and that is wait time. So I'm going to take about 30 seconds and just pause quietly and let you look at this question. Great. So just a little reflection time for everyone to think about this question: what aspects of remote learning that you've appreciated most and would like to see carried back into in-person schooling? So let's see if anybody has any responses to that. And again, we'll take notes as we go here. Yeah, Miles.
Can you all hear me?
We can.
Thank you.
Okay. I would say flexibility on homework. So like ever since like we've transitioned back to school, we've kind of gone back to like you get something, it's due the next day. Whereas like I don't really know. I like having kind of like they assign something and then it's like due at the end of the week because it kind of gives you flexibility to like work stuff into your schedule and things like that because we do have a lot of stuff going on outside of school. So I would like to see that.
Okay. We can go, and Commissioner, I don't know if you want to call on them or not, but looks like we've got several hands. How about Layla?
Yeah, sort of adding on to Miles, I definitely think that flexibility was very helpful throughout this virtual learning experience. But I really wanted to point out, and I know this sounds sort of simple, but my teachers created the habit of telling us sort of the plans for the entire week. Like ahead of time. And I think that was really helpful for me and several other students because like Miles said, we stay busy. And so it's easier for us to plan ahead of time and think about, oh, well, we're able to like if we have an event on Thursday night and we have homework due by Thursday or something, we can know that we have to do that maybe earlier in the week, and make adjustments on our own. So I feel like even, I know this is simple, but just encouraging teachers to have that practice of giving us sort of a week preview of what we're gonna do was really helpful.
Great. And so all of there are several of us on this call. Every Monday morning, we go through the calendar that I have ahead for the week at the Department of Education. We also share sort of key things happening in the state from an education policy perspective. So that's a practice that we have as professionals. And so certainly makes sense that those same things would be beneficial and helpful to students as well.
Okay. Looks like Layla cannot she doesn't have a hand raised, but I'd like to go to Layla. Layla?
Hi, can you guys hear me?
I can.
Hi, so I was going to say that I really appreciated having teachers post their work on Google Classroom, not necessarily online work, like they can assign work in person, but also just having that like help with organization and like seeing what we need to do for the week was really helpful to me, and I'm sure it's really helpful to other students as well. So I'd like to see, I guess, more use of Google Classroom carried back into in-person schooling.
Okay, good point. Logan, go ahead.
So for my school, we were on standards-based grading, and then we had like an A and B day schedule. So we already had kind of that flexible schedule. But one thing that I really liked that we did this year was Wednesdays were like a catch-up day. So we didn't necessarily have any new content that day. It was just kind of a day to reflect, do any makeup work you have, ask questions that you may have missed throughout the other week, and stuff. So it was a nice little break in the middle of the week to, just kind of do those things. And I really like that in terms of, we still got the content covered, I guess, for this year. But having that day to just kind of catch up on everything was really nice.
Okay. All right. Good point there. Soyana?
Yeah, I would say maybe accessibility is a big point because previously either parents or family members couldn't maybe make it to their students' parent-teacher conferences, and that kind of led it to being kind of less involvement on the family's part. And then also with extracurriculars, my school has had like this year has been the most diverse year in terms of who's involved with extracurriculars, because students don't have to catch the bus after school and go home. And in that return, we see a lot of students of color involved in clubs or just typically students who wouldn't, who would take the bus to school. So in terms of extracurriculars, when we do go back, I would recommend a hybrid option so that there's a projector displaying students who want to be a part of a certain club or organization, they could do that virtually as well.
Okay. All right. Caleb?
I have a couple of ideas that I'd like to share. So my first idea that I'll mention is really kind of focused around student mental health. So I feel like, here, not only in the Commonwealth, but also on out across our country and even across the world, student mental health has really been stigmatized for a long time. But I feel like in the wake of the pandemic, conversations have been in place that are centered around student mental health, and those conversations have validated the issues that young people face in terms of their mental health. So be it anxiety, be it depression, and so on, those conversations have sort of changed the way that we look at that. And I hope that as we move forward, we can keep that in mind when it comes to providing flexibility and sort of a sense of leniency in a way when it comes to the education of students across the Commonwealth. And then also, I think that, and I mentioned this earlier when I talked about, virtual learning, it's sort of taught us to embrace new forms of education, and then also in large ways it's challenged the traditional way of thinking when it comes to education. And I think that allowing for a very individualized experience as we move forward is an aspect of things that I would like to see carried on.
Okay, great. All right, thank you, Caleb. Sophie?
Yeah, just to echo everybody about flexibility and having things scheduled, that was so nice. But also it was really nice to have everything kind of streamlined to like one platform, because it made it really easy to find all the materials that you had for class and be able to see everything that was kind of going on. And with that, like a lot of teachers and stuff really tried to do like varied instruction for a while, especially when they were getting used to transitioning online. And so it was really nice to have instruction in a lot of different forms, and that I think was a lot easier because we were relying so heavily on technology. So it was a lot easier for like a teacher to have a lecture that they did over Zoom and then also record that lecture so students could go back and watch it if they needed to see it at a slower pace, or if they just wanted to go back and check that. And then also things like posting links to other websites or videos so it would help us understand. And so it was really nice to have like lots of different ways that we could learn the content, and that was like a lot easier because everything was on on computers and the internet.
Great. Thank you, Sophie. All right, so great response on that question. Commissioner, you ready to go to the next one?
Let's do it. Let's go to the next question.
All right. Next question.
Yeah. What has been really hard about remote learning that you hope you never have to manage again as a student? So what was really hard about remote learning that you hope you never have to manage again as a student? So let's again take another 30 seconds or so and just reflect on this question. Okay, now I'll invite any of you to raise your hands and chime in what was really hard about this remote learning you hope you never have to manage again.
All right, we'll start with Logan.
So one thing that I think that this year, one would be like the lack of motivation that I think a lot of students have had to deal with. But I think for me specifically, where that kind of came from, or part of it at least, was like a lack of involvement in the classroom, to where, we join our Zooms and there's all black boxes, no one's really participating in class. So it was almost more like watching like a children's TV show where, you'd have a question be presented and then it was kind of like we would answer in our heads, but not necessarily out loud. So really that collaboration in the classroom, I think, works to, better kind of motivate people and then also just overall make the classroom more enjoyable. So having that lack of motivation or lack of kind of classroom involvement is something that I wouldn't really want to have to go through again.
Okay. All right, let's go to Cade.
Yeah, I would agree with Logan there. I think the lack of involvement and participation was really hard to deal with. And then the kind of drop off or like a little bit of an instruction deficit that we faced, which wasn't in all of my classes for sure. And I think I've talked about it before, but I definitely had a couple courses this year where, we may have joined a virtual live meeting a couple of times, but it was very minimal. And it was just pretty much an like solely online class with hardly any communication, which really took away, I think for me, the best parts of school.
Okay, thank you. Caleb.
So let me say that I had actually sort of transitioned to life as a remote learning student prior to the pandemic, because a number of my courses were online through KCTCS. But the biggest issue that I've faced over the course of the past year as a student has to be a lack of motivation. I've struggled to find the motivation to get my work done, and I think that that's common among all of us. And then also just the isolation that I've faced and that we've all faced from our friends and from other activities in the community. That's really taken a toll on me. So I'm hoping that as we move forward, that I'll never have to deal with that type of isolation again, and that we will never have to deal with it. So with that, I think that those are really two of the largest issues that I've seen as a student, and then also that I think are facing other students as well in Breathitt County.
Okay. It looks like there's a couple other comments in the chat. I'd like to at least, can you all hear me?
Yeah, I was just going to say also, Tony, real quick, I had another thought that came to mind that I'd like to share. I imagine that, I think it's important to note that for a lot of students who have been at home, I'm sure that they face difficult, situations. And so I imagine, that in Breathitt County, that is definitely an issue that students have had to deal with. And so that weighs heavy on me. I just wanted to share that.
Okay. Hey, Lauren Shackelford, I see that you've got your camera on. I didn't know if you wanted to share. I think that's a really good, it's kind of consistent with what we're seeing in the chat. Did you want to share on camera? I don't know if you can unmute, or maybe she's not able to do that. But there's just to consider, consistency about, she had mentioned without being in person, there was an extreme lack of accountability for students, which made it hard to stay motivated in school and to do work. And she also agrees that with others about the lack of participation and communication, because it made her that much less interested in school. We're hearing a lot of this. I know our districts, this is going to be a big issue for our districts to kind of figure out how do you re-engage with students and get them motivated again. And I've seen that in a couple of other comments in the chat as well. Jack kind of mentioned too about taking the test online, how he really didn't like doing that because it killed his grades, and it was just really hard to try to manage for him, but also for his teachers. So these are all things about remote learning that they hope they never have to manage again. Cade, your hand is still raised. Did you have another question?
Sorry, no.
Okay, but it looks like Gavin. Gavin, do you have something you'd like to add?
Yes, ma'am. I think I heard a few people mention that whenever they joined classes, that like the lack of interaction kind of made them feel like they didn't need to interact. So I'm wondering if it was more kind of a spiral effect that caused more of a lack of motivation. So student A is feeling motivated, or isn't feeling motivated, I should say. So they don't interact in class. And that causes student B to think, oh, I don't need to do anything either. So that causes their motivation to go down. And then I think it just kind of snowballed from there through the different classes, causing more people overall feel less motivated, and that they didn't have to do work, and that all this didn't need to be done, or that it shouldn't have to be done at least.
Great. These are really fantastic feedback. I think we may have time for another one, Tony. Can we get to question 3?
Sure.
So question 3, after this pandemic, what do you hope adults will do to make in-person school better for next year? What do you hope they don't do to school next year? So it's kind of a 2-part question. What do you hope adults will do to make in-person school better for next year? And what do you hope they don't do to school next year? So again, take about 30 seconds and think about these two. Okay, so we'll have anyone come on and you can answer either one or both of these questions. What do you hope adults will do to make in-person schooling better, and what do you hope they don't do?
All right, Logan.
I think that one thing that we have done like well at this year is kind of this idea of compassion over compliance. And so that kind of idea of kind of, we're all going through something. I don't necessarily know what's going on at your home or, what's going on behind the scenes, but kind of looking at that and saying, although you didn't turn in your homework, just get it into me, sometime soon, and we'll, work with you to really kind of, make sure you're ready for whatever it may be. But having that kind of sense of, encouragement and that sense of, wanting you to succeed. I guess one thing that I hope they don't do, maybe, I don't know, that's kind of hard just because we haven't been in school so long. I'm not yet back in in-person school yet. So I think one thing that we would have to kind of work next year is kind of filling that, gap, I guess. So yeah.
Okay. It looks like, so Gracie had to leave early. I just had to leave to check off a little bit earlier, but she raised a good point I'd like to share is, I hope that parents and teachers become more understanding of us. They seem to believe that doing work from home would be the easiest thing in the world. And I really hope that they do find more compassion for us in that regard. So that is one thing that Gracie would like to share with all of everyone.
Logan's
go ahead.
point too. Yeah, similar to Logan's point too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then Lauren, it's like, yeah, Lauren's has something too. I hope that teachers do not overload us with work next year because they think we did not learn as much. Hope that they're as flexible with work as they were this year, which is another point raised on the other question. Great.
All right, I think we can get to another one. Let's try to get this. Let's try to get to question 4 here.
What do you feel you missed out on? What do you feel like you missed out on or lost in school this year because of the pandemic? So let's think about that for about 30 seconds. What do you feel like you missed out on or lost in school this year because of the pandemic? Okay, we'll invite anyone to respond to that. I also want to acknowledge Jack has a quote here from the last question. I hope that teachers and adults will pick a platform that they're used to as well as students are used to. This whole year, we decided to use a whole new platform that 80 to 90% of the teachers used last year. I'm all for learning new things, but it's frustrating when everyone is learning something that feels forced and unreasonable. Great. So yeah, let's jump in on anything that folks felt like they missed out on. Jack has my friends and relationships. Yeah.
Okay.
Socializing. Yeah, though we were in class online, us students never just really got to talk. Yeah, I think that's something that adults felt as well, that sort of unscripted, we see each other in the hallway or in the parking lot and get to catch up. So that I think that's similar experiences. Yeah, everything felt really structured.
So Layla?
Yeah, just piggybacking off of pretty much what everybody else is sort of sharing. I definitely think sort of the aspect of socializing is something that we've definitely missed out on. But adding on to that, I think, like personally, I love getting to meet people and I love trying to help people. It's sort of how I get my source of energy throughout the day sometimes. And so I feel like definitely like not being able to meet new people through I don't know, small groups or working on project has been really something that I've really gotten to miss out on. And having those opportunities is what helps us learn not only how to interact with different people and be sensitive to diverse groups of people, but also it sort of challenges us to think differently, if that makes sense, whether that be academically, but also social and emotionally. So, yeah.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and we have a statement from Lilith here. More than anything, connections with teachers have been weakened when online school started. And Lauren says, what I really missed this year is going on gifted and talented field trips. They were always so fun, and I learned a lot. It's great to travel and have new experiences. I feel like that is something so many students missed out on. Yeah, sure. And I think let's get this last one, Tony. I think it's really important.
Yeah, I think so.
Caleb wanted to jump in too. Let's let him do that, and then we'll get this last question.
No, okay. I was just going to say that, the experience that I feel like I missed out on is similar to everyone else's, in that, the socializing that comes with school. It's always something that I've enjoyed, particularly enjoyed when it comes to school. And so that has been difficult, having to miss out on that. And then also, as I believe it was Lauren mentioned just a second ago, with school field trips, I always love to get to travel with my teachers and friends and whatnot, and it's been difficult not being able to do that. So I hope that as we move forward, that's something that we can look at going into the next year for future students, because it's sort of weird to think about how I'll be, leaving the environment. But yeah.
Well, I was going to say, just to piggyback off of that, I know I told you all, but we are looking for an in-person student advisory meeting in May. So I'm working on trying to get a date so that you all can hopefully come up to Frankfurt and see what we do at the Sauer Building. I'm not sure how many other people will be there, but we'll be following our social distancing and healthy at school guidelines. But I think it'll be really nice to have you all in person if you are willing and able to do that. And we'll offer a virtual format too as well. So I'll get with you on those dates. The last question, Commissioner, you want to jump in on that one?
Sure. What are you most proud of? And we'll just take a few seconds. And appreciate everybody staying on for a couple of minutes. If you need to go right ahead. But what are you most proud of this year? Anybody jump in on that?
Okay, we have one hand. Gavin, go ahead.
So if I was to say specifically what I was most proud of, or well, generally I would say my school district did a pretty good job converting from like online and hybrid to 4 days a week and all virtual. That they did really well with that. But if I was to say specifically, I'm on my school student council, and every year we have a Dance Blue mini marathon to raise money for Dance Blue, and we couldn't do that because that's in person. So I was a big part of this, which is why I'm so proud of it. But we converted our talent show into our Dance Blue fundraiser. But instead of doing it in person, we had to make a YouTube video. And we did it that way. And I feel like we did a really good job converting it to online. And I'm really proud of the product that came out of it.
Great, thank you. We have a couple of things in the chat here. I want to grab those. Most proud of learning, adaptability, being flexible from Logan. Lauren on the previous question said she felt a lot less confident in the education. So there's a really thoughtful comment there. Thank you. Some other quotes about I've reached some of my lowest points, but I'm proud that I continued to challenge myself by participating in academic competitions. That was Soleila. Miles, I'm most proud of how college admissions went for me. It was definitely hard to adapt with COVID, but ended on a good note. And Jack, I'm most proud of the resilience everyone has shown through the pandemic. It looks like we have a couple of other folks willing to speak as well. So go ahead, Tony, let's recognize them.
Let's go, Lauren Little, go ahead.
Yeah, so I just want to say that I'm really proud of our teachers this year, because I know it was hard for them, especially doing virtual learning, having to adapt to that and try to find new ways to teach. But also when people started going in person and virtual, I know it was hard for them to keep track of both of those. So I just feel like that they've done a really good job with that.
Great.
Thank you.
Caleb?
So I'm going to kind of build on what Lauren said. I'm really proud of our school administrators, be it our superintendent, Mr. Watts, or our principal at the high school, Mr. Davidson, for, the work that our school administrators have done to try to really reduce the risk as students move back into the building for hybrid model. Really, it's been great. And I think that overall our district has done a really good job with decreasing the risk of COVID-19 transmission in the classroom and also in hallways and things of that nature. And then also it's the same in our elementary schools. All of our elementary school principals have worked really hard. And then in individual classroom, teachers have worked really hard to meet the needs of students. And then, of course, students here, including myself, but also everyone else that I've encountered in classrooms this year, have really been willing to adapt and have remained flexible, and I'm really proud of that. I'm proud of us for sort of living life during this pandemic. And then also, I'm really proud of the initiative that our community has taken to help decrease the risk, and it's just really been a blessing to know that I believe we have, given a good effort to prevent the spread of COVID-19 as much as we can.
Great. We have Lauren here. Feel like teachers personally have had this year have done a good job adapting and making adjustments for students. Thank you, Lauren. And a request from Dr. Sweeney if Gavin could share the Dance Blue video.
Yeah, we'd love to see that, Gavin. So.
Okay, I can send the link in the chat here.
Perfect. Yeah, any projects that you all have done this year, despite what has happened, feel free to share those. I know I mentioned that at the last meeting. We'd love to see those. Okay. Well, all of these questions will also be in your exit slip, which I hope to get to you towards the end of the day today. We also have a superintendent's webcast from 2 to 4 today, Eastern time. So you all are always welcome to join that. That's on our KDE media channel. So you can hear, you got a lot of the information today ahead of time. The supplemental school year will be also on that agenda, in addition to some other Healthy at School updates and such. So I just really want to again say how proud I am of this council and of you as students. You all are just great examples of student voice throughout the Commonwealth. And you really are just need to be commended for that. We really, really appreciate everything that you do to help us every single time that we ask, for advice or for input. You're always willing to step up and do that. And so I'm just incredibly proud of every one of you. So I just wanted to say that before I pass it back to Dr. Glass and close us out for the day.
Thanks, Tony, and thanks, everyone. Make sure everyone sees Gavin's Dance Blue video. That'll be fun for everybody to watch. Thanks, all of you, for participating in this. I think we had a great conversation, and I really am going to encourage our teachers and staff from around the state to repeat this same conversation that we ended with. I think it was really powerful and can lead to some better decisions going forward as part of that empathy interviewing process again, where we're seeking to understand from those most directly impacted by our decisions. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate you being with us today.
Have a great day, everyone.